So, Sabina, you're here to talk to us about your experience of doing the NVR groups, and hopefully this isn't too uncomfortable for you. But I know that the people who are doing our groups just now are really keen to hear from somebody who's been through the process and the experience themselves. So, the first question we were asked was, why did you come to the NVR group?
So I have two children. Charlotte, who is she's gone on 15 now. Last year she would have been 14, and Daniel, who's a year younger. And we started having lots of issues with Daniel's behaviour. So just at the tail end of P7 and then transitioning into high school, we also had the COVID pandemic. So a lot of routines sort of went out the window and had lots of issues, and things just became really tense at home. And a lot of shouting, a lot of anger, not just from Daniel but also from myself and my partner. So it became quite problematic and really struggled to cope with that, and didn't think actually it was very helpful for Daniel because he wasn't really responding to the normal sort of, oh, there's a bad behaviour, I'm going to give you a consequence. I had worked well with my daughter, but not with him. It was just an escalation of things, and it just led to a really horrible atmosphere at home, which was really bad for all of us as a family.
Yeah. Um, Following taking part in the group, has there been any success further down the line?
I would definitely say so. So obviously the group teaches you a lot of sort of techniques and also kind of makes you think about what could be behind the behaviour, and also to just accept that, well, your child's just wired that way, they're not going to deal with consequences well. And, I didn't want to live in a house that was just so full of, you know, anger issues. So we definitely say that what I did was it actually just reminds you of how to express your love for your child. Um, you know, Even though there was lots of negative stuff, you obviously love your children. I love Daniel, and I felt that the group really helped bring that back into focus, accept what was going on, and actually think about why is he reacting like that. So there's obviously certain things you will learn in the group.
Mm.
So the whole thing of the kind of shield of shame really helped me to understand that actually a lot of the time when Danny was becoming standoffish, why was that actually happening? The other thing I really loved was parental gestures, and all of that sort of stuff really improved relationships. And while I initially thought, oh, my focus is school, so Daniel had stopped going to school, so I should have said that earlier. Was about going back to school, actually thinking about what I wanted to get out of the group was more about relationship building at home, improving relationships between Daniel and myself, but also with his sister, between all of us really. And I would say that's probably been the biggest change, and that's something that still carries on now a year later. And these wee kind of techniques I'm still using now,
Yeah.
and that's really has had a positive impact on us and things that will calm at home. Not perfect, but when something does happen, I feel much better. I feel in a better position to be dealing with it.
Excellent. You mentioned a couple of the strategies that we cover in the group. So, thinking about what's behind the behaviour, relational gestures, and these things are easier said than done. What was it like for you actually implementing and starting to use some of these strategies?
Well, for me, it was like I was desperate for something to work. And some of that stuff, like the parental gestures, actually made a real quick difference. And some of the stuff you learn obviously takes a bit longer to really understand it. So it wasn't easy. I think one of the big things for me is actually persuade others to believe in it as well. My partner really struggled with the concepts and understanding what it actually is we're trying to do, or I was trying to do. But you need to obviously work together and have the same approach. So he was given opportunity to kind of participate in one session, which really helped. I think he's still sometimes a bit sort of doubtful about it, as opposed to sort of moving away from the way you grew up. I grew up really in quite an authoritarian household, very traditional. You actually kind of feels a bit counterintuitive to begin with. I think the longer you do it and you just remind yourself, right, okay, you know, sometimes you're just going to fall off the wagon, you know, and it's not going to go well, or you're maybe not sticking to what you had intended to do. But I think just kind of reminding yourself, taking a step back, and you know, you obviously pick yourself up, and you know, and then that's eventually it becomes sort of much more ingrained in your sort of parenting style.
Yeah. So you mentioned absolutely quite rightly there. It can be difficult to keep going sometimes, you know, because you know there is no quick fix. So, how did you find that? How did you manage to do that? You know, maybe there was a day where something didn't work. You know, to sort of get back on it. How did you find that experience? And did anything help?
So I think a lot of this is well about self-care. I think it's important that as a parent you look after yourself, and actually take time for yourself. You know, because you always, well, I should be there for my, you know, you can't always be there. And if you're not well within yourself, you know, that's gonna sort of affect your relationships and also affect, you know, how things are at home. So self-care is really important, you know, taking time out to do things for yourself, and sticking with things that you know you're going to be good for you. For me personally, it's exercise. You know, I'm really, sometimes I would also commute to work by bike. Sometimes that takes longer, and accepting, right, I'm going to do that because it's good for me, and not thinking, oh, that's going to take more time, you know. So what was the question again?
No, absolutely. What you're talking about makes a lot of sense. So we were talking about how to keep going, how to
Yeah.
keep the energy levels up.
Yeah.
And for you, and I know it's different for lots of people, but for you, especially physical exercise, you were saying, but giving yourself not just the permission, but almost the order to do that stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of sticking with that, and obviously having, I think also having supports. So I'm obviously not from Scotland, and also having friends around you that you can actually kind of draw strength from. You know, having good friends that support you through that was very important, and nurturing those relationships is really important. You know, again, it's, if you don't make the time for these things, I think life just passes you by, and everything sort of kind of goes into a bit more of a balance. You know, you're not just a parent, you're also a person. And again, that just contributes to the sort of your overall well-being. And again, then it makes that easier when there's a stressful situation or something happens with your child. Actually, then you can deal much better with these situations because you're better within yourself. But as I said, it doesn't always work. And then it's about just removing yourself, taking a wee breather, and thinking, right, okay, I can't fix this right now. I'm just going to go away and think of the baskets. Don't forget about the baskets. Baskets are important. Because sometimes you just want to fix everything in one go. It doesn't work like that. It's really picking your battles sometimes, and sometimes I let something go because I want to actually improve on something bigger, you know, or on something else. Yeah, I would say that's probably some of the learning for me from the process.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of things. So you mentioned, so firstly, your partner. So so obviously your partner will have a role in the sort of the sort of behaviour management and all that stuff in the house, but maybe feeling that they're not 100% on board with some of the things we ask in NVR. And you were also mentioning, you know, cultivating relationships, sharing things with friends. So in terms of that supporter role, you know, because we do talk a lot about that, is opening up that supporter role. How did you find it getting supporters on boards, and how have you found it sort of keeping them up to speed with things?
Yeah, I found it okay. I have a good. So I obviously, for me, it was identifying supporters for different parts in the family. So it was important for Daniel to have an independent supporter outside of the family, but also identified that my daughter and myself could do with a supporter. So I approached people that I was thinking, obviously, who that could be. So I approached, you know, obviously certain people within the family. For myself, it's a good friend who's a bit older. I suppose it's sometimes a bit difficult because sort of life is busy as well, and you know, always keeping people updated on kind of what's going on. I think sometimes what I would say is, I suppose if there's big things happening, I would let the supporter know and suggest, oh, would you mind maybe checking in with Charlotte, would you mind checking in with Dan, something's happened, or there's a wee change coming up, or we've had a chat about something, or you know, he did something really well, you know, would you mind sending a wee message? But I think sometimes, I think it does become a bit more sort of natural as time goes on, and you just sort of dip in and out of that. But again, you know, I think it's also about kind of being realistic, and yeah, life sometimes gets busy.
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes you might just forget, but it's something that's there, and you know, obviously people do understand that as well. People are busy as well, so that's been quite a positive thing actually. Yeah.
Yeah, great. And the last question that the group asked us was, how is life now beyond the group once you've finished attending the weekly sessions?
I really enjoyed the weekly sessions, and I did miss them when they stopped, because it's actually really nice to hear from other parents that they're in the same boat, you know, you're not alone. Particularly through the pandemic, it was a very isolating experience having a problematic child at home. Which isn't, he's not a problematic child, but that's how I perceived it at the time, so that's obviously shifted. I don't think that any longer. But it's a very, for me, it's like, I did go in thinking this isn't going to be a magic solution, but it did equip me with a lot of tools that will, you know, they're going to stay with me forever. So whatever challenges come our way now, hopefully I'll be able to deal with them much differently. And it's been a long, hard road for both my children, who have some mental health struggles, and well, kind of getting back into education and kind of working on that just now. Which I know you think, oh my God, that's a year down the line, but again, it's that reality check. It's not a quick solution. Things are a little better at home. I, you know, feel that relationships have improved, which was what we set out to do. And now it's the next step. So going, I'm dipping into my baskets now about what's also important. What else do we want to tackle in school is the next big thing now, and using a lot of the techniques that I learned in the NVR group. It's been really helpful for that. So, yeah, onwards and upwards. To
Excellent.
be continued.
To be continued. Sabina, thank you so much
No
for
bother.
your time, and I'm sure that will be really helpful to the parents who are in the group. Thank you.
Thank you, my pleasure.